All right, today's lesson is going to revolve around an equations review. So on my screen, the first thing I want to make sure is that we do our Desmos skill of the day. Remember, anything that's not in the parentheses that does not have a coefficient or variable can get put in together. So I'm going to highlight some stuff on my screen. You could put this entire blue section in your calculator all in one shot. And then obviously we're going to combine our negative 3n and our negative 2n together. So again, since there was no variables inside my parentheses, I put the entire thing, being careful with where I put my second power and all my symbols. And notice that on my calculator, I got positive 59. And then when I did my variables, I had negative 3 minus 2, which gave me negative 5. So the final answer would have been negative 5n plus 59. All right, so as far as today's review, we're going to look at some problems today that we definitely have worked on in the past, and then we're going to introduce one new type of problem. So the problem on the left, I'm going to have you work out these two problems. So I would try to pause the video and see if you can do these two problems on your own. If you're still feeling a little unsure and you need some examples, these would be two great examples to go over. So this first one on the left, I would pause the video at this time and try these two. And when you're ready, unpause the video and I'll go over these two with you. All right, so this problem on the left, I'm going to break it into a left side, right side, and I'm going to locate my variable with coefficient negative 1/2 n. I notice that on the same side as my variable n, I have a positive 12. In order to get rid of that positive 12, I'm going to have to subtract 12 from both sides. Again, whatever I do to one side to make it cancel out, I need to do the opposite to start solving. So negative 16 minus 12 is negative 28. I'm going to drop down my negative 1/2 times n. I know that my inverse of multiplying n by negative 1/2 would be to divide each side by negative 1/2. And again, whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, being careful of my symbols. The negative 1/2 will cancel out and leave me with just n by myself. And then negative 28 divided by negative 1/2 in my calculator would say positive 56. The second one on the right here, again, I'm going to break my equation into a left side, right side. I'm going to locate my variable, coefficient, and any symbols that go with it. So now I'm going to notice I have a negative 1m. On that same side, I have positive 11. Well, if I think to myself, how can what's the opposite of positive 11? Would be to subtract 11 from both sides. Again, whatever I do to one side to cancel out, I do the other side of my calculator. 22 minus 11 is also 11. But again, this problem's not done yet because I have a negative 1 times m. In order to get m by itself, completely by itself, I need to get rid of it being multiplied by negative 1. I know that the opposite of multiplying by negative 1 is to divide each side by negative 1. Again, the negatives will cancel out and leave me with just positive m. And then 11 divided by negative 1 is negative 11. So we're going to go through a couple other multi-step equations today, and we're going to introduce one new type of complex equation. So first example, again, remember, a lot of these problems that we're going to go over today, they're just not set up. We know how to solve them at this point, but we just got to make sure that we know how to set them up. So again, if I look at this equation, I notice that on the left side where I have my a variables, there's a couple of terms that can be combined. I have 4a minus 6a. I know that they combine to make negative 2a, and then I have a negative 12 and a negative 8. If I combine those, I really have a negative 20. So this same problem could be rewritten as negative 2a minus 20 is equal to negative 40. From there, now I can solve it. So I'm going to locate my variable negative 2a here. What's being done to negative 2a? It's being subtracted by 20. I know that the opposite of minus 20 is to add 20 to both sides. My 20s will cancel out and leave me with negative 2a. On my other side, I have negative 40 plus 20, which is going to equal negative 20. And then my last step, I need to get a by itself. Well, what's being done? It's being multiplied by negative 2. The opposite of multiplying each side by negative 2 would be to divide by negative 2. Negative 20 divided by negative 2 is going to be positive 10. So a is equal to 10. So again, if we can ever shorten up or simplify the equation to make it easier to solve, that's going to be our first step. After that, then we'll use our inverses, our golden rule, and be able to get the variable by itself. Okay, second example. This is going to be the problem that's a little bit new. We saw this when we did expressions, but we've never seen this with an equation. So I have negative 15 is equal to 7 times x plus 4, all being divided by 3. Now, when we talked about these problems earlier this year, we talked about breaking it apart and making everything that's being divided by 3, basically turning the problem into a fraction. So I'm going to rewrite this as 7 over 3x plus 4 over 3. Again, all I did was take my whole thing being divided by 3 and break it into two parts, the 7 over 3x and the plus 4 over 3. From there, once I have the problem set up, now it looks like something that I know how to solve. I have my 7/3 x on the right side. Well, what's being done to it? It's being added by 4/3. I know the opposite of adding 4 over 3 would be to subtract 4 over 3. Again, I'm going to use my Desmos calculator, especially on this one, because I'm not going to want to deal with unlike terms for my denominators. So I'm going to go to my calculator, negative 15 minus 4/3, 4 on top, 3 on the bottom. Again, since this problem is using fractions, I'm going to convert it to a fraction in my Desmos calculator and make it negative 49 over 3. But again, I'm not done yet because all I did was cancel out my plus 4/3. I have to drop down my 7/3 times x. Again, I'm going to reread the problem. It says negative 49 over 3 is equal to 7 over 3 times x. I know that the opposite of multiplying by 7/3 would be to divide each side by 7/3. Again, I'm going to go back over to my calculator and I'm going to take my answer, negative 49 over 3, and I'm going to divide that by 7 over 3. And notice that my calculator gives me an answer of negative 7, so that we could say that negative 7 is equal to x. So again, these are going to take some time to get a little bit of practice in, but if we notice, I'll get them all on my screen so you can see it a little easier. It's nothing that we've really done before. We just, again, have to break the problem up and set it up and then be able to use our inverses of adding and subtracting and multiplication division to be able to solve. My last example for today, again, we just have to be able to set up the problem, this time using the distributive property. So on this right side, I know that I can over under this negative 3 times the inside of my parentheses. So negative 3 times positive 2x is negative 6x. Negative 3 times negative 5 is going to say 15 in my calculator, so I'm going to write plus 15 to show positive 15. Now that I've set the problem up, again, I'm going to locate my variable here on the right side. What's being done to my negative 6x? It's being added by 15. I know that the inverse operation of adding 15 is to subtract 15. Whatever I do to one side, I do the same to the other. 12 minus 15 is negative 3. That's what negative 6 times x is going to equal. Again, I know the opposite of multiplying by negative 6 is to divide each side by negative 6. And again, I'm going to carefully go into my calculator and do negative 3 divided by negative 6, and my calculator is going to say negative 0.5. Or you could say negative 1/2 if you wanted to make it a fraction. Either of those two answers would be perfectly acceptable. So you should have your 3 examples at this point. I'm going to have you try these 4 problems that are on your screen. So at this point, use your notes from last week, use your notes for today, especially for this second one here in black. And break these apart and set these up and solve. So pause the video at this time, and when you're ready, unpause the video, and I will go over these last 4 examples. Okay, first example, I had negative 10 is equal to n divided by 6 plus 15. The first thing I did to both sides was subtract 15 to get rid of my minus 15. Negative 10 minus 15 is equal to negative 25. But that's what n divided by 6. Remember, this is not a fraction. This is a division symbol. So n divided by 6. The opposite of that would be to multiply each by 6. And 6 times negative 25 is negative 150. Second one here, this was the new type of complex equation. So I had x minus 12 all being divided by 2 is equal to negative 24. So again, all I did was break it apart. I put x divided by 2 minus 12 over 2 is equal to negative 24. The first thing I wanted to do was get rid of my minus 12 over 2 by adding 12 over 2 to each side. Negative 24 plus 12 over 2 is negative 18. Okay, and then I have divided by 2. The opposite of dividing something by 2 would be to multiply by 2. Negative 18 times 2 is negative 36. Third one, again, this was like one of the examples that I did earlier in this lesson. I had 32 minus m is equal to negative 10. The first thing, in order to get this negative m by itself, I have to get rid of my positive 32 by subtracting 32. Negative 10 minus 32 is negative 42, but again, that's not what m equals. That's what negative 1m equals. In order to get negative m to positive m, I need to divide each side by negative 1 to get the negatives to cancel out. And negative 42 divided by negative 1 would be positive 42. And the final example here, the one with the fractions, again, this one was already set up for me. All I had to do was begin by doing my inverses of minus 10. The opposite of subtracting 10 would be to add 10 to both sides. 64 plus 10 is 74. That's what negative 3/4 times x equals. Since my opposite of multiplying by negative 3/4 would be to divide each side by negative 3/4. And 74 divided by negative 3/4, you would have gotten one of two answers. Either you would have gotten this big fraction, 296 over 3, or if you left it as a decimal, it's about 98.6 repeating. You're going to use those examples of all these problems that I just went over today and do today's assignment. So at this time, make sure that you have all your notes together and get going on your assignment.